Thanks for watching The Personal History of Games. I'm your host, Eric Kanius. This week, we're joined by Professor Shareef Jackson. When he's not tutoring folks through his Math Looks Good LLC or playing D&D online with the rivals of Waterdeep, he's busy being a strong voice in STEM diversity advocacy. Shareef was kind enough to join me in playing some combat for the Atari 2600 while we discussed arcades, barcades, and everything in between in his personal history with games. Here's that conversation. So what made you think of combat?
Well, when I was young, we had an Atari. We had a ton of video games in a shoebox. My family was also pretty poor, so I did not know why we had all these games. Little did I know this was about 1985 or so. So, like a couple years after the video game crash.
Right.
The Nintendo was already out, but it was kind of too expensive for us to get. So we just had all these games, and I felt like we were rich. Little did I know that was because, the games were selling for like $1 each, because Atari was, just like not a thing anymore, really. But we played a lot of Atari in the mid 80s, way after, the reign of Atari was kind of over. And like combat was definitely one that my brother and I played a lot of, so like there's a lot of like memorable Atari games, but like when I think of probably the most memorable, it would be combat for sure. We would just play for hours.
Yeah,
it just felt so real, which is weird to say now, but like the sound of the treading of the tanks is one thing that really made it feel real to me. And I don't know, it just felt awesome. Like it felt great to like get like a hit from far away. And they also have another mode that's like planes.
Yes.
Like the biplane mode, which is very good too. So yeah, we just would play tons of this.
Yeah, there's something about being young, and even a game like this game is fairly simple. Just being able to find hours and hours and hours of entertainment out of it is definitely something that, I don't know, I'm not able to do anymore. But yeah, there's something about the simplicity and just playing with someone forever. It was very fun.
Yeah, and like, yeah, it's simple, but it's also like on levels like the one that we're playing now, it's strategic, like there's a cover, like there's like baiting people out and tricking people into doing a certain thing. I mean, it like really is kind of like easy to understand but hard to master, which I guess is most games of this era, because they didn't really have, the memory capacity for complex controls or anything like that. So most of them are like you get in, and I think that they also have kind of that arcade like mentality of like they want to hook you so that they can take all your money in the arcade. So,
right.
Yeah.
Come on.
I just remembered that you can't strafe. There's no strafing in combat. No strafing on that joystick, on that 2600 joystick.
They are rigid in their wanting to have realistic tank controls.
Yeah.
Also, being able to wanted these bullets around cover is something I wasn't expecting. I just launched it yesterday to get it going. I didn't expect to be able to turn the bullets.
Yeah. It is pretty cool. It is pretty cool. And also my brother in general was better at me at most games. But this is one where I could hold my own on.
Is this an older or younger brother?
Older for sure. He was better at me than in like everything. So
that's the way it is. Yes, yeah. I have 4 older brothers, so I know the feeling.
Yeah,
it is just that.
Also, look how combat gives you no invincibility frames at your respawn.
Yes, you're gonna just destroy me.
Yeah, what's going on here? It's supposed to give you some frames to recover, get away.
You got the bouncy rounds.
Oh, that's right. Now I forgot the bounce rounds had noises. I forgot about the noise. That's interesting. Yeah, like I would love to see the code for this game. I'm pretty sure like it's open source by now, but
probably.
Like I've done my share of like C++ and C coding of games, of like very simple games. for a school project, we had to code like Tetris in some other games. But I would really love to see the code behind combat. I think it would be interesting, and like not only see the code, but see the limitations of the 2600 chip and memory to see like how they had to like balance all the resources. Yeah, because like I remember thinking adventure. I remember thinking like how that was even possible. Like it seemed like it just had infinite levels, infinite screens on that game.
Yeah, that stuff is wild. Like getting this emulator set up in order to get this game, they just had ROMs with the entirety of the Atari 2600 catalog, and it was 10 megabytes.
Wow.
And that's it.
Yeah, it's something. I mean, it's like, I almost imagine like, obviously I was young, so I wasn't thinking about that stuff, but like, say I was like in college when this came out studying coding, like I wonder how I would have thought about like I can't believe they fit all this into a kilobyte.
Yeah, I'm not good at that sort of logic, but I can't imagine it would be a fun puzzle to solve. Getting lucky with some of these bounce shots.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's kind of hard to tell how. Oh, whoa, that was completely planned. It's kind of hard to tell how many times it's going to bounce. It doesn't bounce the same. It's almost like it's the total distance, I think.
Yeah,
because like it can bounce a lot of different times if you shoot it closer, but if you shoot it farther, it might bounce like once.
Cool.
Yeah, like I just wonder like with the play testing, like how they come up with the number of bounces,
Mm-hmm.
Or like the sounds even, like did they have a library of sounds that they were going through? Just like a lot of interesting questions that obviously we like ask about games now, but I feel like people now, they like think that these simple games that people had the reference point of now when they were like creating these, but it's like, no, they had to play test these and, make sure that it felt good and all that stuff. Like obviously not the same. It wasn't like the same kind of industry, but like people were still proud of their work and wanted to like make things look and sound good. What? I have no idea how that
happened. Caught me completely off guard because it bounced all the way around the map and hit me again.
Oh wow, yeah, that one too. Also, I just warped through the other.
Yeah, you did.
Side, which might have found some programming, some little glitches here. I know all those combat speed runs that people do.
Everyone,
take advantage of the glitches.
So speaking of people programming, not knowing where we are now, that's kind of the loose format of the show, is starting from where we are now. We're playing combat over the internet in this hellscape of 2020. But where did this all start? So we started with you having the Atari and all those cheap games, and having those games show up because of the industry collapsing and making them cheap. Like kind of unlock this as an availability for you and your family, which is a kind of a fascinating thing. How'd that go through you?
Yeah. I think if you get too close, I think, oh, we're just bumping on each other. That's kind of X-rated, but
it's getting a little hot and heavy in here.
Wow, it really, I think if you're too close, I think it goes right through you. I shot that directly through you.
And it still hit me.
Bounced off. Wow.
There we go.
Interesting.
So you mentioned arcades in the little survey you filled out. What was your quintessential arcade experience?
I would probably say a little near the end of the arcade era actually. With like Street Fighter 2. That's definitely one game that I can remember like exactly when it came out. And it kind of just like changed everything. Like it changed everything in terms of like, I remember before Street Fighter 2 came out, there was no like main game. It was just like a bunch of games in there.
Right.
But when that game came out, they like started putting a game kind of in the middle, and they had to put space around it because they knew that people would like line up for it. Now, I'm not sure if people would like do that with like, Hackman or Space Invaders, because those are like a little beyond my time. I'm pretty sure that they did, because like those were like massive hits,
Yeah.
We're in the clouds. Yeah. It was like super interesting. So like that was my definite number one experiences playing Street Fighter 2 for like the early time, like before everyone actually knew all the combos and stuff. It was just a cool like mutual learning experience of like having people teach you the game.
Right.
You know, it was something unlike something I think I've experienced in gaming. Really, was like that game, just like bringing a lot of like different people. Like I remember that like that was one of the few games that like I would see people from like people would go from arcade to arcade from like different neighborhoods and like different towns to like play other people. So like it became like almost like a league, you know.
Right.
So yeah, it was you know, 1991, I believe, was when Street Fighter 2 came out. And, also like having 6 buttons was pretty crazy at the time. Like it was just like, what is going on here, So yeah, it would just, and like also, I still contend that it probably has, for its time, some of the best music in a arcade game.
Yeah.
Like that. I believe it was called like the CPS board, which was the board that like a Capcom used that like they had updated from like Final Fight and stuff. That board, just like the like amount of power that it had for like music and stuff was just crazy.
That's cool. Just thinking about like people touring their fighting skills around. What part of America was this in?
So this was in northern New Jersey. So I grew up in Paterson, New Jersey, which is maybe about 10 miles from Manhattan. So like we had a lot of arcades since like we were near like like the media capital of the world. So we had a ton of arcades and malls and stuff.
Cool.
It was very, very fun.
Yeah, growing up in, I mean, even by the time I was around, arcades weren't big, but in my prairie town, kind of equivalent to the Midwest, not a lot going on.
Yeah. I always wonder about the arcade scene in other parts of the country, because obviously you like hear about like California and the New York area and stuff, but I kind of wonder how it was in like other parts of the country.
And did barcades do anything for you when they came back, or when they?
Yeah. Actually, I'm moving. When I lived in New York and in Philadelphia, that there was a place called Barcade, which was I believe the first one that was like commercially like successful. Where like I loved it because the beer was cheap and the games were like 25 cents.
Yeah.
So like we would just like have some drinks and just go in on a game of like Ninja Turtles or NBA Jam or something like that. So like it was mostly focused on like multiplayer games, and it did kind of have that vibe of like meeting people that you don't know and just playing a game, and like you almost don't even have to like talk to people. Like there's no expectation that you got to be like friends with the person or anything. You just go there and just play, and maybe if it's cool, like you might talk to the person a second time, but like you never had to.
Yeah, that's an interesting aspect to bring to a bar, especially when they're so. There's a lot of bad stuff going around at bars, or just like awkward moments, or people talking to people that they shouldn't.
Yes.
But like arcades being there as sort of a buffer or a barrier, or even an icebreaker, just to have some sort of social thing happen, but then it can just break off. There's like a beginning and end to it.
Yeah.
I think it's a very interesting aspect to bring to a bar.
Yeah, and the barcade in Philly specifically was like, it wasn't too far from my house, but like I definitely had to take a train to like get there. And it was just cool because I got to meet people outside of like where I lived.
Right.
Which I really liked. And it was just dope. It was very dope. Now, like a jet game, this is another one where I thought that the sound was incredible. Like to me as a kid, it sounded like it was actual jets. Like it sounded like it was Top Gun or something, like when I heard the background of the jets.
Yeah.
Like it sounds like so cool. Like even like now, just like thinking about like the resources that they must have had, like it sounds awesome.
Yeah, they're really dedicating a lot of power to constantly play a sound. I mean, for someone who hasn't played this before, launching the game and having that tank noise just be constant and quite loud the first time I launched it was unexpected. But I could see how that would just add, especially with these games that don't have a lot of visuals going for them. If you have sound, that definitely adds a whole other aspect to the experience that not a lot of games at the time had.
I would say that this was probably the one that we played the most after the tank game, was the jet one for sure.
There's a good sense of speed too.
Yeah. It feels faster even than other shooting games like River Raid or Space Invaders and stuff. Like, it feels faster, you know. And like this was probably like the sense of speed. Like, I probably didn't have a sense of speed in like a game after this till like probably like, you know, Sonic and like F-Zero and stuff, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, like speed was definitely not a thing in video games at this time. It was like all about saving those clock cycles.
Hey folks, if you're enjoying this podcast, Beamed Media has another new podcast I think you'll love. It's called Do We Like, and I co-host it along with my partner Robin. Robin, do you want to explain the show?
Thanks, Eric. Hi, I'm Robin, co-host of Do We Like, a podcast where Eric and I debate common people, places, and things to decide if we like them or need to leave them. Join us each week as we debate controversial topics like pickles, underwear, bubble tea, and Queen Elizabeth I? Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, or come find us at dowelike.com.
So was it just mainly you and your brother playing games in the household?
So my mom and dad would play a little bit. I definitely remember them playing some stuff with us. I think once it got to a NES controller, they kind of backed out a bit. Mm-hmm. I think they did play some Mario because it definitely was, you know, for like people that were not around during that time, it was an obsession. I mean, like it was like, I don't even know what you would even equate it to now. I guess like Minecraft or Fortnite or whatever. It was everywhere. It was on commercials. It was cereal. There was T-shirts. It was cartoons. Like, it was inescapable, you know? So like they kind of wanted to see like what the type was about. So they definitely played some. I actually remember the day we got our Nintendo. I should ask my parents exactly when it was. I think it might have been like maybe 88 or something like that. And I remember playing with them on our first day. Like I remember them actually playing with us through like the first couple of levels of Super Mario Brothers.
Cool.
That was pretty cool. That was probably the last time I ever gamed with them. Until actually no, not the last time, but probably until Wii Sports was probably the next time I actually played a game with them.
Yeah, that's the kind of the gap there once they made it accessible. Although the one game I was able to get my mom to play was Rock Band.
Oh, nice.
That was quite the experience.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I really think that you know, people forget that how, I mean, in that time, like games were Nintendo. Like Nintendo was like basically a synonym for video games.
Yeah. And
it was like a big mainstream thing. Like, it wasn't like this niche gamer thing that some people tend to think that gaming has always been, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's easy to forget because Nintendo got huge and then it kind of waned away, and then more specific things came out like the N64 and the PlayStation, and it got a little more complicated, but then the Wii brought it all back. And
and the like reason why those other companies were successful because their marketing was like, we're not Nintendo, you know, like we like provide a more mature experience or a more realistic experience, you know, which like worked. I mean, like that got Sony and Microsoft in the game. I remember thinking it was completely ridiculous that Microsoft was coming out with a video game console. I was like, there's no way that would ever work. No way. You know, I mean, like, because like that came out, and I think it was 2001. I was like a senior in college, and you know, all we would do was complain about the bugs in like Windows 98, and I think Windows XP was out, but like I think Windows Vista had just come out.
Ooh, classic.
And like we were like, how is this company not going to have the buggiest console of all time? Now, like it was a little prophetic with the Red Ring stuff with the 360, but like that didn't like destroy them, as a company. Like they
surprisingly, no.
No, and like now we're like, about to have a new console launch soon, and they have in my opinion, one of the best models of gaming with Game Pass. Where they are really like focusing more on like selling the service a la Netflix than necessarily the hardware.
Yeah, I feel like that's a lot more future thinking than just making another console and doing what you've always been doing. That's surprising to see from Microsoft, honestly. But it is good. I'm enjoying Game Pass because I don't have an Xbox, but I play on the PC, and being able to play a lot of these games that used to be console exclusives, and then they've been putting them all on the PC, and it's just been, I'm giving the money that they didn't have before, so.
Yep. Yeah. I haven't owned an Xbox since the 360, but I've still been able to play like Forza and Gears and, Ori and all those games. I'm happy that they are like doubling down on it, because like it really is like the future, but it's also not as sexy as like we got this new box with exclusive games, that you can only play here, which is obviously the like Sony and like Nintendo model,
Yeah.
Like the classic model, I guess, of games. So like Microsoft is trying to take it to the next level, which I appreciate, because competition is good. Like they all push each other to be better.
Yeah, definitely. The competition. Speaking of which, you're destroying me with these damn flying games. I can't get a handle on anything. You keep hitting me.
I was a fan of the jets. I must say.
So you seem to be quite a learned fellow, especially in the maths and physics and engineering and all that.
Yeah.
Was there any inspiration from games of that, or just that like coinciding interests?
Yeah, I think there was a little bit of an experience. I mean, when I was growing up, I had no idea what engineering was. It wasn't like at that time in the 80s and 90s, it wasn't something where they were like, hey, like you can be an engineer in school, know? So I knew games were cool. And I was the kind that I would write into game magazines. I would, ask questions about stuff, but I still never could say, I didn't know that the math and stuff I was learning were a part of games, like when I was a kid. So I didn't really make the connection until later when like I was, the invisible one. I forgot about that.
This is weird.
Yeah, this one is super weird. Yeah, so like I don't think I knew when I was younger. But I definitely, when I started getting into maybe my junior or senior year of like high school, because I was kind of thinking about what kind of college I wanted to like go to. So I knew that I wanted to like do something that was math related, but the only thing that I could think of was like accounting, because I kind of knew that you could, do bank stuff.
Right.
But it wasn't, I think, until I got to college and like I had to take these computer science courses as like part of my engineering thing, and like I got to program games, and I was like, this is awesome, So I originally thought I wanted to be like a game programmer, I guess, but I found out that like, I don't know, straight up software is not really my thing. So I dabble in it, and I love it for like teaching logic and algorithms and stuff, but I found out that like I enjoy to talk about and discuss games, but not from like the strict like the like a programming side of things.
Right.
So like I teach a class at like the University of Wisconsin in like a Whitewater, where we talk about like gaming narrative and diversity in games and that kind of stuff. So like I feel like I prefer to have my contribution there, as opposed to like being a like dev,
Mm-hmm. Maybe you can answer this question. I was just having this conversation with my wife. Because we're not big math people, just the way our brains work. So maybe you can answer. You seem to be a fan of math.
Yes.
What excites you about math? What is interesting to you about math?
I think that actually kind of hit you from a close up as opposed to last time. I wonder if it's because you're invisible. Invisible. Interesting. What excites me about math is that it's a language. And it's a language that helps describe everything that we see. That's what excites me by far the most, is like, it's not this sort of abstract thing that people just learn to learn. It's like literally like answers questions that I had as a kid, like, why does fire burn? Or why do I get shocked when I put a fork in an outlet? You know, or like, how does a refrigerator keep things cold? Like all these questions that I always used to have about the things that I observed are like answered by that language, you know? So like, yeah, that is what excites me about math, is because it satisfies that curiosity that I've always had about like why things are the way they are.
Cool. That is the best answer I've heard for that. So thank you. But not to put your teacher hat on. How does math answer how fire burns? See, this is maybe I should never understood this.
Sure.
How did that one in particular?
Yeah. So if you might recall, back in the day, Aristotle, or like if like you're a fan of Avatar, the Last Airbender, it used to be said that like everything was made of like earth, air, fire, and water, of like the four elements, and that like everything else is like a mixture of like those things, right? But through chemistry, which like I use as math as the like language, we like actually see that fire is not a like element at like all. It's like an output of a chemical equation, which like can be described with like algebra, which is basically like adding oxygen to like another substance, you know? So like it's really like a output of a reaction between elements, as opposed to like a element itself.
Oh. So it's like this plus this equals fire.
Yeah.
In like the most base.
Yeah, and like the like whole reason that like people put water on fire, or they say to like smother fire, is that fire needs oxygen, and if you smother something, it's going to reduce the amount of like oxygen, and if you put like a water on it, that is also going to reduce the amount of like available oxygen to that fire. So like fire needs oxygen, which is why you technically are not going to have big fires and explosions in space.
Right.
So yeah, it's
blowing my mind. It makes so much sense. It's just having it explained in a way that is understandable is sometimes the thing that blows your mind.
I mean, that I think is one of the biggest failures of like most teaching, is that we don't teach things based on like what people see every day. You know, like we see fire every day. I feel like every student should come out of a chemistry class knowing why fire exists, you know, or like why like smoke exists, or like how like water is made. You know, like I feel like we still kind of like follow this like 100-year-old kind of like model of what someone should know.
Yeah.
And like instead of like I'm thinking about, hey, we should be enabling students to describe what they can visibly see. And then if they're interested in like further in the advanced courses, then we can focus on like, you know, on the subatomic level and that kind of stuff, you know?
Yeah.
I feel like that will be a much better model for us.
I agree. As someone who kind of recently learned that I have a learning difference, and like the abstract really doesn't click. I was real bad at school because it was all abstract.
Yeah.
But like seeing things and visualizing things is how it makes sense. So
yeah,
thank you for that little lesson. That's very helpful.
I mean, I get that question a lot because like I'll often have, you know, like I'll have parents when I'm engaging them on like a tutoring session, they might interview me or like ask me some questions, just like to kind of see like how my mind works or like how I think, you know, and like that'll usually be a part of it. So I get a lot of questions like that, or like they are just like curious about it.
Does teaching about games like changed your relationship with them at all, or is it just like the way you've always been thinking about them and now you're sharing that with other people?
Oh, it's definitely changed it. You know, it kind of can be hard to take that hat off and just enjoy a game for what it is when I'm usually analyzing to like see if something will be a good game for the class. You know, that has happened a lot over the years because like I've taught the class for like this is going to be the fourth year in the spring. So like because our class involves like actively like playing games and like discussing them in like real time. I'm like always thinking about games. Even like I see a trailer and I'm basically like, oh yeah, this might be this, and I might be able to like use it for like for this thing, you know. So it has definitely changed it, but I think for the better because I think that like all media, we should be thinking like intelligently about it. Like it doesn't mean that you can't enjoy something, you know. Like hey, I just watched the like Bill and Ted movie. I wasn't like analyzing it for like anything deep, you know?
Yeah.
But I do think that, you know, it has like helped me to like appreciate games on like a better scale and like as like more important like media. So,
what are some games on your syllabus? I'm always curious about that.
Sure. So I'd say some games that like we've used a lot. We have a part where like we talking about how like changing the input experience can change your perception of a game. So we have our students play Bayonetta, which is like a pretty combo heavy game with like a regular controller with a mouse and like a keyboard and with the Microsoft Adaptive controller.
Cool.
And we have them write about like, you know, how that's changed their experience. We use Gone Home a lot for like exploring like narrative and like a sexual identity and like a queerness. So like, we use that game a lot. We use to like show how the same concept can be explored in like different ways. We like use the like cooking module from Job Simulator, which is a VR game. So we have them try to cook in Job Simulator versus trying to cook in a 4-player game of like Overcooked.
Right.
So we do that. Because most of the people in my class are like, you know, like 17, 18 years old. I like having them play like old beat 'em ups like Double Dragon and Final Fight and stuff, so that they can see how like character design was and like how women were like depicted, how like people of color were, how like it was very like stereotypical and stuff, and we talk about that. We also will like typically do like simulation game like Animal Crossing or Stardew Valley or such to like also show the like relaxing kind of benefit of games as well. So yeah, there's many other games that we use, but like those are like the first ones that come to mind.
Cool. Yeah, so interesting thinking of it as a medium with such different levels. I mean, other mediums have that too. You're listening to different types of music, different types of movies, but just the interaction adds a whole different element to it.
Yeah, and like I think if you asked the average person, they would just assume all games are just like shooter games that are violent, and because the only time that they hear about games is when they're being blamed for some violent act or something. So they assume that that's what most games are.
Did you always find yourself teaching, or is this a new thing?
You know, I kind of did because I was always a kid in class. I usually wasn't like the one that got like the absolute best grades. I mean, I was always good in the class, but like I was never like the top person. But I was always the person that the top person would ask to explain something. So I noticed that like there were a lot of people that knew how to like do problems and get to answers, but not a lot of people that had conceptual understandings of the stuff, you know? So like I was kind of always like the explainer of stuff, you know? So because of that, in like a college, I started doing some like volunteer tutoring that ended up being like a kind of like a side business. And then that became a full-time business as of 5 years ago. So like I've been a full-time tutor. I kind of left my corporate engineering jobs that I had over the years. So I've been doing it full-time for 5 years, and it feels great to like work for myself and to know that, you know, I feel like I'm really doing what I was meant to do, which was not the same with the engineering stuff because like, while I was good at it and it paid well, I wasn't like passionate about it. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, that's like a huge, you know, as I get older, I mean, I like just turned like 40 a couple of like months ago. I'm basically like, I only want to do things that bring me joy, you know?
Mm-hmm. It's a good lesson for everyone. Also, yeah, that skill of teaching and being the one sought out to explain things is not a common skill.
Yeah, I used to hate it because it didn't necessarily translate into me like getting A+ and everything. But I learned later that it's not really about the A+ because it's about like really understanding it. So
yeah, so I guess we'll start wrapping it up. If there's things that you want to promote, well, then now's the time to do it, because it sounds like you got your business and some other stuff going on.
Sure. Yeah. So my website is shareefjackson.com. That's SHAREEF Jackson.com. That basically has links to all my stuff. And I'm Shareef Jackson on all social networks. So on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, on like a LinkedIn, all that good stuff. And I'm also a cast member on the Rivals of Waterdeep, which is a weekly Dungeons and Dragons show, which is at twitch.tv/Rivals of Waterdeep, and also Rivals Waterdeep on Twitter. We've been going for about 2 years, and it's a blast. So I also love the like tabletop, non-electronic gaming as well. So
cool, very cool. Yeah, I mean, not to backtrack, but is D&D a newer thing, or is that also something that's been around?
No, D&D is pretty new. I started it because a friend of mine who I respect, Tanya DePass, she said like, hey, like we're looking for a D&D group where there's a mix of like veteran players and like new players. And I was like, well, I'm a new player. So like, yeah. So like I trust her. So I went along with it because for some reason D&D was always kind of one of those things where I always grew up doing like quote unquote nerdy stuff, you know, but that was one of those things that I felt like was even too much like for me.
I felt the same way.
But man, I really wish that like I did it earlier because I absolutely have fallen in love with it. You know, I've fallen in love with it for sure.
What's your takeaway as a game player and a studier of games? There's a whole lot going on with D&D, and I think there's a lot of special things about it. I don't play myself, but like just like working with people that do and hearing about it, it's like gaming on a different level. Not that it's any like better or worse. It's just like so different than other, especially video games.
Yeah, I mean, I think that my thing with D&D is it basically gives me everything I've wanted from video games. Because I'm the kind of person when like I play games, especially a narrative-based game, I'm always like, well, like, why does this person do this? Or like, why couldn't they do this? Or like, I wonder if they programmed this in there, you know? So I always wondered about those decisions that the developers did not have time to put in, or they made, you know, a design decision not to put in. D&D is like kind of like you're playing a game as you're developing it.
Right.
You know, so like you kind of get this really intimate shared experience that's just between the DM and the players, which is awesome. And like, I kind of love that. Like most of my favorite games, you like kind of have that like unique experience that like only you had, you know, and like every D&D game is like that, you know? So yeah, it's really cool.
Cool. Well, thank you for sharing that. And on that note, Shareef Jackson, thank you so much for joining us on the Personal History of Games. Oh shit, I forgot to introduce the podcast. I did that.
Oh yeah, that thing that we're talking about.
This is probably the latest I've introduced it. This is the Personal History of Games, where we talk about how games have intersected with our lives. That'll count as the outro as well. Thanks for listening, everyone. Thank you again, Shareef, for joining. It's been a blast playing Combat for a while, getting destroyed, but yeah, thank you so much for sharing your stories.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
You can hear more of the Personal History of Games on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, or wherever else you listen to podcasts. If you enjoyed this episode and want to help us out, please leave us a rating and review. For updates, you can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at PHOGPod, or check out our website at personalhog.com. The show is hosted and produced by Eric Kanius, executive produced by Robin Lands. Do We Like is brought to you by Beamed Media, a Canadian podcast network.